if that's a depressing fact or it's an exciting fact. I mean,
it's so exciting
by that fact.
The amount that you are able to piece together about how the world works at that age is just totally unparalleled. You're like the most brilliant scientist who ever existed for that period of time, and it's really cool to think about.
That is cool. It makes me think. So we have in Indiana earlier this month. He clearly feels great about all of the members of his own party he has managed to take out in the past month. I'd note it took $33 million to take out Massey, most expensive race in congressional history. And now he's expanding the battlefield of his Republican Civil War, though I would note, threatening not almost certainly why. Today, Congressman Fitzpatrick sent a letter to Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche demanding answers about Trump's new slush fund for Capitol rioters. And Congressman Fitzpatrick,
well,
in case anybody watching has not seen it, I just want to play one clip of that. We'll take a break and we'll talk about that when we come back.
I think he is a more mature, more disciplined version of himself than he was in his first term. Trump has lots of good ideas, and he's been right about a lot of things. You have to give him credit where credit is due.
A symbol of that very wealth inequality, he tried to garner some goodwill by addressing the unfairness of the U.S. tax system for the average Joe.
I started thinking about this and doing some research. A nurse in Queens who makes $75,000 a year pays more than $12,000 a year in taxes. Does that really make sense? The bottom half of income earners in this country pay only 3% of the taxes. It's only 3%. We can find 3%. You know, we should.
Thank you for being here with me
Thank
tonight.
you.
Okay, coming up, we dug up some old video today that blows another huge hole in the bogus lawsuit Trump filed against his own IRS. We're going to show it to you and talk about it with Congressman and former prosecutor Dan Goldman after a very quick break. We all know the creation of a $1.8 billion slush fund for Donald Trump's allies was the product of an unprecedented, frivolous, and highly suspicious, sketchy lawsuit filed by Trump against the IRS over the leak of his tax returns. Now, rather than fight the suit, Trump's Justice Department, led by his former personal lawyer, he doesn't like to be called that, but that's a fact, Todd Blanche, negotiated a so-called settlement to keep the case from going before a skeptical judge who seemed inclined to dismiss it. It has all the hallmarks of a backroom deal. And tonight, there's even more evidence to suggest that Trump's lawsuit would have been laughed out of court had the DOJ actually stood up for the American taxpayers who are now footing the bill. Remember, Donald Trump filed his lawsuit against the IRS earlier this year, back on January 29th. And keep that date in your mind, because in his lawsuit, Trump claimed that he first discovered that his taxes had been improperly accessed exactly 2 years earlier than that, very same day, January 29th of 2024. So why is that date important? Well, it's important because the law governing the unauthorized inspection or disclosure of taxpayer information has a statute of limitations of 2 years, meaning you can only sue within 2 years after discovering that your private tax information has been breached. So given that 2-year deadline, it's pretty incredible that Trump filed his suit just under the wire exactly 2 years to the day before that statute of limitations would have run out. Pretty convenient, right? Except new evidence is now emerging that suggests that Trump knew his tax returns had been improperly accessed months earlier than he claimed in that lawsuit. You see, when the IRS contractor charged with improperly accessing and leaking his returns pleaded guilty back in October of 2023, Trump's personal lawyer, Alina Habba, remember her, was at the courthouse. And here's what she had to say.
When you see how differently people are treated, it's wrong, and there's no place for it. One felony count for releasing a sitting president's and candidates' tax returns months before an election to the New York Times. We just learned that inside. And then releasing thousands of other people's tax returns a year later. There's no place for that. And this guy has one felony charge.
That was Donald Trump's own lawyer, Alina Habba, publicly acknowledging that her client was a victim of the IRS contractor who leaked his taxes. She said that in October of 2023. That's when that video was from. 3.5 months before the date that Trump now claims he first learned about it. And that, of course, would mean the statute of limitations should have expired long before Trump actually filed his lawsuit against the IRS in January. So the fact of the matter is, as ridiculous as Trump's new slush fund is, as offensive as it is, as crazy as the reactions from all the rioters are, the pretext that the Justice Department used to create it was just as BS, full of it. Joining me now is New York Congressman and former federal prosecutor Dan Goldman. Okay, there is a lot to say about this slush fund, but I just want to start with this very specific detail. It feels like there is clear evidence here that it was outside of the statute of limitations. I mean, we just showed the Alina Habba video there. This is something that was in a letter Congress also sent, Democrats in Congress also sent, making this point. Now that there is a settlement, though, legally, is there anything that can be done about that fact?
Well, the interesting thing about the settlement is that it's not really a settlement of the lawsuit. What they did is because they realized that 2 days later, the judge was going to dismiss the case because the parties were not adverse to each other. Donald Trump, under his own theory of being king, controls the IRS and the Department of Justice and is the plaintiff. So the judge was about to throw it out, as you can't have a lawsuit between the same people, same person. So that's one reason. And so what they did is, rather than settle the lawsuit as part of the case, which the judge would have had to have approved, they withdrew the case altogether. And then they had a separate settlement that looks like a settlement of the lawsuit, but is not anything related to the lawsuit. And so they obviously did that because this was all a ruse to begin with. It was all a manufactured mechanism to try to justify him when we saw the opposite. It's incredibly disheartening for them. I think that this lawsuit is interesting. They're going to have a hurdle to get through standing, but there are many other avenues, I think, that are more directly attacking legal avenues. Yeah, I mean, it's a violation of the Constitution in a number of different ways. It is, effectively an emolument, right? He now has given himself something of value with the IRS stuff. It is structured in a flawed way. And ultimately, it's a complete abdication of the obligations of the Department of Justice. So I think there are lots of different angles that this can go back into court, and I expect that it will.
Congressman Dan Goldman, I know you're a very active member of Congress, but I'm very grateful for your legal background. Always. Thank you for being here with me.
Thanks.
Okay, coming up, Marco Rubio just criticized the leaders of another country for plundering its nation's wealth. And I actually think the irony may have been lost on him, but we will remind him of it. Ben Rhodes is the former Deputy National Security Advisor to Barack Obama, and he joins me next. Trump's Secretary of State Marco Rubio released a video of himself speaking directly to the people of Cuba. And in that video, Rubio told the people of Cuba that the reason they don't have electricity or fuel or food is because the leaders of their country have plundered the nation's wealth. Now, I'm not going to defend decades of leadership of the Castro regime. That's not what I'm suggesting. But isn't that just a bit ironic as a message from the Secretary of State, given his boss, Donald Trump, has just established a slush fund to pay his political allies with American taxpayer dollars? And it is also quite a statement, given it is the U.S. military that has functionally blockaded the country at Trump's direction for the last 4 months. The U.S. has had an embargo on Cuba since the 1960s. But since the beginning of the year, Trump has radically escalated that embargo into a full-blown blockade, with only one oil tanker reaching the island since February. So Trump and Rubio are far from the outraged observers that Rubio performatively presented them as during that video. They're a big part of the reason things have gotten worse in just the last few months. Rubio, but you, again, as you just mentioned, I should have mentioned in the introduction, you did negotiate the deal with Cuba back a little over 10 years ago. And what we saw, it all reminds, I think, a lot of people out there, including me, of what we saw with Maduro. It feels a little bit like deja vu, right? There's an indictment, and then there's this concern. We don't know what's going to happen, that this could mean another attempt at regime change, more military action. Is that how you see it? And if that happens, what message does that send?